Here are 10 things you may have missed from the Dragon's Dogma 2 gameplay showcase. Starting from the very beginning of the trailer, we can see that there's a character on the back of this Griffin that flies into view. In the next shot, we can see that this continues into a flight over the Batal region. It's uncertain if the character that's flying the Griffin is ourselves as the hero or potentially a villain. This could also hint to differing modes of travel throughout the story, as the main method of travel will be this fairy stone that we see in some of the next shots, and also the carriage system we see later. Other than that, it seems pretty obvious that flying on Griffins will be more than just a nice little combat trick, and instead may hint to some more significance in the game's story. Moving on later in the trailer is a bit of extra tidbits we might have missed. First and foremost, the game sports no lock-on feature from what we can see. In fact, when this fighter character moves close enough to a goblin, it seems that his character performs somewhat of a strafe around the creature. This sort of character autolock feature is also hinted towards in the Archer class, as you do not need to actually aim whenever you use the Archer class normally. So while it won't have a lock-on feature like games such as Elden Ring, it does seem to have some sort of automatic combat rotation feature for characters that are in fights. Another small detail I happened to catch is that now it looks like you can grab enemies and attack at the same time. This is a welcome change from Dragon's Dogma 1, where pawns could grab creatures but not attack them at the same time, instead calling out for you to attack them while they held them in place. But of course, as we see here, it looks like this thief character has a goblin pinned down and is actively stabbing it, which is a pretty cool little feature. As a bonus detail, it also should be mentioned that I did not see one instance of a camera zoom whenever a pawn grabs a creature, so it might be indicating that Dragon's Dogma 2 is looking for a more seamless combat experience as opposed to the more cinematic style of Dragon's Dogma 1. And moving on to our fourth major detail, it looks like Capcom has implemented some sort of finishing move to some interactions within combat. For example, you can see that this blow here has more of a shockwave attached to it, which could indicate a combo finisher or could be the execution itself. And then later on we see that the fire character absolutely buries his sword within the goblin that he's facing. So it looks like Capcom will be embracing the allure of finishing moves here in their next title, Dragon's Dogma 2. For a more vocation specific detail that I've noticed, and I also pointed out in my previous video but will include here as well, it seems that we have Mage flight while casting. Previously in Dragon's Dogma 1, you could not do that at the same time. You could only float or cast, or sometimes cast while in midair, but you could not float and cast at the same time. It seems that in Dragon's Dogma 2, they are bringing the ability to at least cast light attacks while you are floating in midair. Now, that's not to say you can't also cast magic while floating in the air, but that has not been revealed yet, though it would be cool if it was in the game. Now, we did sort of blow past these 4 initial vocations that you can choose to set out on your adventure with. However, one thing I want you to notice from this shot right here is that it doesn't look like any class has any more than one weapon type. And what I mean by that is, it seems as though fighters, for example, will have a one-handed weapon and a shield, thieves will have 2 daggers, archers will only have bows, and mages of course will only have their staff, but they didn't really have any other type anyway. So unlike Dragon's Dogma 1, which opened up with a class called Strider, which you could equip dual daggers and a short bow to, now it seems that has been cast away in favor of a more balanced combat system and more of a role-based combat system. For example, they don't want the assassin-like class to also be able to be a ranger. Hopefully the way I worded that makes sense, but the main thing I want to get at is that each class will have its own separate identity. Just to be clear, this issue of an identity crisis within vocations wasn't really an issue in Dragon's Dogma 1, but it seems like they want each class to play super differently than the next one over. Moving on, I also touched on this in my previous video, but it doesn't seem like there's any Mystic Knight class in the game. For those of you that don't know, Mystic Knight was a class in Dragon's Dogma 1 that heavily relied on parries and sported a magic shield with maces and swords. However, as we can see in this shot, it looks like Fighter is automatically going to have access to maces from the get-go. And I'm going to do some cheating a little bit and look on the Dragon's Dogma 2 official website and see that Mystic Spearhand has taken up a combination of both red and blue vocation colors. Now you might be thinking, what does that have to do with advanced vocations? Well, I'm so glad you asked. In Dragon's Dogma 1, advanced vocations were either a copy of the monotype of their basic vocation they started out with, or they would be a combination of 2 colors. For example, the Fighter, Strider, and Mage class were red, yellow, and blue, respectively. And as it follows, Warrior, Ranger, and Sorcerer were also red, yellow, and blue. Now the combination vocations, they were a bit more advanced and had mixed colors. Assassin was red and yellow, Magic Archer was yellow and blue, and Mystic Knight just so happens to be red and blue, with Mystic Spearhand taking up the red and blue color scheme, it seems as though Mystic Knight will not be in the game. However, I wouldn't put it past Capcom to give us a little fake out though. Maybe we will see Mystic Knight, but I wouldn't count on it. Moving on to number 8, we have a more combat-specific feature here. We're going to talk about monster environmental interactions. So obviously everybody saw the shot with the explosive barrel blowing up the water dam. While they were showing off the thief vocation, they did show a brief clip of him climbing on the back of a Cyclops and the Cyclops tripping and hitting his head on the stone below. As you can see here, there's clearly a depression and some cracks in the rocks after this occurs. This seems to indicate that monsters in general will be more responsive to the environment around them. You can see the next clip here. In a similar way, the Cyclops gets knocked off balance and then becomes a nice little Cyclops bridge for the Batal area. So it's my thinking here that at least with Cyclops, whenever you knock them off balance, they are in a state of searching for environmental objects to then interact with. This could create a range of possibilities while you're in combat and could create some new openings that were not present within Dragon's Dogma 1. So I'm very excited to see how creative the community can get with all these different interactions. For number 9, let's talk about one of my personal favorite features that we'll see immediately once the game enters nighttime. We can now equip lanterns without opening the dang inventory. Ladies and gentlemen, we have truly entered the year 2023. This is 21st century gaming, and I don't have to open a menu to open up my lantern. Very nice quality of life feature. And last but not least, I want to skip all the way to the end for the dragon interaction here in this final clip. Now, as the clip opens up, we do see this lonely soldier here off to the right next to the rubble. They seem to be clad in some sort of armor and are aiming at them with a bow and arrow. And in the very next clip, we do see some sort of knight climbing on the face of the dragon to stab him in the eye. Now, what this tells me is obviously this is a site of a big battle, much bigger than the fight in the beginning of Dragon's Dogma 1 with Sivan. And more importantly, I don't believe that this is in a secluded area. It seems to be some sort of settlement or town that has been razed to the ground by the dragon recently. In fact, I would wager that the guards here are, in fact, guarding something. Now, if we move forward in the clip here to this very last one with the dragon's whir, we will see that that archer from before is no longer there. Also, the soldier from before on Grigori's face is no longer there too. Now, if we know anything about the lore of the dragon from the first game, it's that dragons don't attack settlements for no reason. They are in fact looking for the next Arisen, or someone who will become the next Arisen. And lore spoilers here if you don't want to know anything. The Arisen is chosen whenever a soldier or some other citizen proves more willful than the other soldiers around them, and is therefore deemed to have the will to pass on the will of the world, so to speak. So I believe that somewhere in this group of soldiers, it looks like the dragon will find its Arisen, as surely one of them is going to have enough will to be able to pass on that torch. At least that's my theory. Maybe you guys can correct me in the comments if this is viewed like a month later and the game's out or something. But that's going to be my headcanon. I think Grigori finds his Arisen in this group of soldiers, and I think that's what our character will be. Now, I could be completely wrong. I know that there's other clips by the time this video gets uploaded that I haven't really watched yet, but I'll cover those later. But yeah, I think Grigori will find his Arisen and will continue our journey from here. And that, my friends, was 10 details you may have missed in the Dragon's Dogma 2 gameplay showcase. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. See you later.